Okay. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. So, hi, I'm Taylor. I am the Director of Outreach and Community Initiatives for Hear Us, Hear Them. And today is the first of our Be Heard workshops, Music School 101. It's going to be an overview about studying music, specifically in college. So we're going to talk about a few things. The first of all is like, what does studying music look like in college? Then we're going to get into a little bit about choosing programs, and then we're also going to get into application terms, and then we'll end with a little Q&A. So what is music school? Studying music has many forms. So it can look like getting a degree from a conservatory, which is either independent or attached to a university, or a school of music, which is typically attached to a university, or receiving a degree from a community college, a liberal arts college or university, or a research university that's in music or a music related major. Or it can look like getting a music minor, or pursuing a music certificate, or studying music independently or with a teacher, or in a group class setting, or in a co-curricular setting, either while in college or post-graduation or any time in life. So because it is such a wide, there's so many options to study music, which is awesome. We're going to focus on music school in the collegiate context and setting. So there are many disciplines that fall within music or music related majors. So I'm going to talk about a lot, and I just invite you to listen. And if something speaks to you, write it down and then research it later. Because within these disciplines, there's oftentimes even more specific disciplines, which again is great, but can definitely be very daunting. So a lot of people, when they think music school, they definitely think of performance. And performance degrees are an option. If you're interested in becoming a performer, a member of an ensemble, whether that be a choir, orchestra, a band, someone who participates in music theater, like a singing actor, a private instructor in your fields, depending on your graduate work, like an instructor on the collegiate level, or a church musician, you might be interested in a performance degree. And so there's voice performance, there's instrumental performance, which is, theater as well. So if you see under these disciplines, the actual degree types are listed, and we'll get into a little later what those mean. But in the performance context, typically for voice or an instrumental performance degree, you're looking at a Bachelor of Music. And we'll talk a little bit about what the Bachelor of Arts looks like. And in the musical theater context, you're looking at a Bachelor of Fine Arts. So if you're interested in becoming a classroom teacher, a music educator, a conductor, a director of an ensemble, a director of a co-curricular extracurricular program, so an after-school orchestra, band, or choir, or a director of worship or music at a church, you might be interested in degrees relating to teaching and leadership. So that can look like a music education degree. There are also voice and piano pedagogy degrees, which is the study of teaching voice or piano. And then there's also conducting degrees. I will say with conducting, right now, at least in the United States, a conducting degree is typically offered at the graduate level. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you are interested in becoming a conductor, make sure you're applying to programs where you can get some conducting coursework done at the undergraduate level, but typically you're not going to see like a Bachelor of Music in conducting. If you're interested in teaching and or research, or becoming a professor, becoming an arts writer, becoming a music researcher. If you're interested in consulting to either policymakers or music programs, if you're interested in programming concerts, you might be interested in a musicology degree. And if you're interested, especially in research or teaching at the collegiate level, you might be interested in music theory. Musicology has to do, it's generally thought of as the history of music, but it also has to deal with current music as well, and global music. And music theory, depending on the program, might be combined with composition, but it has to do with studying compositional methods and structures, whether those are historical, whether those are contemporary. And yeah, depending on the program, it might be connected to composition. And by the way, if we have any majors here, or like people with experience in music school, and you want to just throw extra thoughts in the chat, you're welcome to do so. So if you're interested in composing or creating music, whether that's classical composition, musical theater composition, becoming a songwriter, producing music, in films, or even working in a live venue, either with a sound system or just like as a manager of a live venue, you might be interested in composition or production, which is also known as performing arts technology. Composition typically lives in the classical realm, but there are programs that are going to have either like concentrations in jazz or musical theater as well, or just offer coursework in those areas. Production and performing arts technology. This, as you can see, there's a lot of different degrees listed under it because it is a very diverse field. So that typically has to do with mixing, mastering, and editing, as well as recording, as well as sound engineering. So in live venue spaces, working with the sound, as well as doing recordings and then post-production work. It's a very wide field. And so that's why it may look like a Bachelor of Music. It may look like a Bachelor of Science. And we'll talk about that a little later, about how you kind of figure out which realm you're interested in. And so there are even more music or music related fields. There's arts administration. So if you're interested in becoming an administrator, manager of artists, director of an organization, arts consultant to policymakers or to corporations. If you want to work in the nonprofit sector, you might be interested in arts administration. It might also be called like arts management. There's also music therapy, which is applying music to rehabilitation and healing and typical therapeutic practices, adding music in. How can music help in special needs classrooms? How can music help in just counseling and therapy? There's also design and production, which is also known as theater technology. This is another very wide field. It can look like studying costume design for shows, or studying sound design and lighting design. And basically it's if you're not interested in being a performer, but you want to work within the theater space, theater technology or design and production might be right for you. And a music degree or a music major is not the only way to incorporate music into your collegiate studies. A lot of colleges and universities will offer extracurricular and co-curricular, organizations, whether they be school sponsored or student orgs. And in addition, a lot of schools have music minors. So minoring in music fields can kind of mean different things. So it can either be you're in a non-music degree and you add a minor in music. So your minor is in music. So that's where you're getting, it can help widen and deepen like the coursework that you're doing for your other degree and give you some musical skills. As well as you could possibly be pursuing a music degree and you want a minor in another area within music or music related fields. So music minors, there's a lot of them. I think a popular one is if you're in a performance degree, perhaps you're interested in a entrepreneurship minor or an arts administration minor if your school offers that. So it's a great way to kind of customize what studying music in college is going to do for you. So now that I've just listed so many different options, it's time to get into like the nitty gritty of what type of degrees are available. So you saw like all the letter abbreviations that imply different degrees. And so it definitely varies from school to school. And so that's one kind of, I guess, hurdle in terms of applications is figuring out what each school you're applying to offers and what you're specifically interested in. What kind of degree you want to get depending on your goals is going to depend on, first of all, the major you choose. It's also going to depend on your curriculum and your intended use post-graduation. So what I mean by that is not every major offers every type of degree. So, you can't get a Bachelor of Science, at least not that I know of, in voice performance, but you could get a Bachelor of Arts. So what are these distinctions? In general, and again, this really varies college to college, a Bachelor of Music is going to have a very music-specific curriculum, while a Bachelor of Arts indicates that it's going to be a liberal arts degree with a music focus. So if you have always wanted a liberal arts education, which means you touch on a lot of subjects, a lot of the core curriculum is going to pull from a lot of liberal arts degrees have like math requirements, and it's a very like broad core, and then you specialize on top of that. That is what a liberal arts degree can do, and typically a Bachelor of Arts is going to indicate that. While a Bachelor of Music, your core is going to be music focused. It's going to be pretty broad within music. So you're going to get music history, music theory. Depending on the program, you might be touching on conducting. You might take some, if you're not like a music education major, you still might take like some education seminars. You might be getting some arts administration. It depends on where you go, but the core is going to be within the world of music, and then you specialize within your musical field. So that's kind of the difference. And they do have different intended uses after you graduate. Of course, everyone's career is different and everyone's education is different. So there is a difference between how you will use your degree and what the intended use is. But for example, if you want to perform most of the time and be a very competitive performer, people are going to encourage you to pursue a Bachelor of Music, because your core is going to be music focused, as opposed to if you want to incorporate performance into your career, but you also want to pursue other things, you might be looking at a Bachelor of Arts. And so when you kind of sense what you want to do, make sure when you're applying to schools, you know exactly what kind of degrees they're offering, because not every school offers every degree. Also, one thing to think about, it's hard when you're first applying to school to think this long term, but if you do want to pursue graduate studies, certain graduate programs are going to require you to have a certain degree. For example, a lot of graduate programs that are offering Masters of Music. So again, going back to performance, if you want to get a Masters of Music in performance, a lot of those schools are going to be expecting you to have a Bachelor of Music on your undergraduate transcript. Again, there are always exceptions to this, but that's just always something to keep in mind when you're kind of planning your personal curriculum. I do have a note here about community colleges as well. So community colleges typically within the music field are offering 2-year degrees or associates. And a lot of people use them as a way to transfer into a 4-year institution and then get their bachelor's. So the associates, it's usually associates of arts. Some have associates in music or fine arts. It kind of depends on the accreditation and what program it's in, but I just want to note that. So if you are interested in entering college on the community college level, you're going to be looking at associates. Okay, so now I would love to have other people talk, and we're going to hear a little bit about real life students. And so if it's okay, I'd like to start with Sean, and Sean's just going to tell us about what he's doing in school and why he chose his major.
Hi, can y'all hear me? Yeah, so hello, my name is Sean Polk. I use he, they pronouns. I am a freshman musical theater major at the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music. Yeah, so I'm a musical theater student, which is a BFA. It's a BFA offered here. I know that some schools do offer BMs in musical theater, but CCM is specifically a BFA. And so I'd say our concentration when it comes to like curriculum aren't as like music theory and like sight reading heavy as like a BM program would be. So if you're looking to like really become like super duper like you can get a score and like analyze every part, like not just the voice lines, but like you can get into like what the orchestra is doing and like all of that, then you might want to look more at like a BM program. But for me, I chose this program because of how I guess like diverse I would say the curriculum is. So we take this semester we take Pilates, we take keyboard for musical theater, we all take jazz. I'm in jazz 1. We take ballet. I'm in ballet 1. We have our voice. This year we're lucky enough to have a voice lesson because it used to be here that not every semester you would have a private lesson, but we're lucky to have a private lesson every semester for our freshman and sophomore year, and we're looking to expand that into our junior and senior years. We also have our vocal coaching, so we have a small group that meets on Tuesdays, and then our entire class meets on Fridays, and that's basically we are choosing repertoire from the musical theater canon, and we work on it with a coach who's different than our voice teacher to give us more like acting through song coaching and things of that nature. And this semester, like, which is really, really unique for Critical Eye Fridays, where we're all like my entire class, we all look at a musical theater piece, or we are looking at musical theater pieces that are controversial or are seen as problematic, and we're talking about like what makes them controversial, how do we handle them as like being very conscious performers, like conscious of the world we live in, like all the stigma and stereotypes that like go into the field and like have been a part of this industry since its creation, like, you know, starting with like, you know, vaudeville at the turn of the century. Like there's a lot of problematic things that happen throughout the canon, and so we just look at those. To go like, I guess, more into like class size and things, I am in a class of 18 people. For BFA programs, musical theater programs in general, they're really small classes usually, at like institutions like this one, but on a conservatory style, they're usually very, very small programs, and it's like a very intense audition process. We go through a pre-screen round in which like that's like the audition to get an audition at the school. And then this past year, because it was COVID, we did live virtual auditions. And so like I would go into a Zoom and I would have like a panel of teachers from every school that I applied to. And then like I would do my material for them. For me, it would usually be 2 songs and a monologue. Some programs will do 2 songs, 2 monologues. We'll do, if they're more acting focused, they might do 2 monologues, 1 song. It just depends on the program. That's also something you should look at, like, because even with BFAs, like different schools will like choose to specialize in certain ways, and they might lean more towards acting or dance or voice, and it just depends on the program. Like, and you can usually find that out like by looking at alumni from each program and like seeing what they're doing, what they're focused in, and like what their curriculum leans to. And it's like you should always like be on their website, like reading in depth, because even within them just being like a BFA versus a BM, each school is like very specific. And yeah, so I did my auditions, live virtual, and then it's like a waiting process. And I settled with, not settled, settled isn't the right word. I chose CCM because of its reputation and just like the environment here. Like a lot of we're just like a family. We really like come together, and like even though we might argue like a family at times, like we really have like a healthy dynamic like within our class and with the other classes. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit into freshman musical theater land. If there are like questions later, like more specific questions, I feel like that was like a semi. Yeah.
Thank you. No, that was amazing. Yes. So yeah, that was, as Sean said, a BFA in musical theater. Kind of on a different side of things, we're now going to hear from Hayla, and Hayla actually did her minor in music. So Hayla, I'd love to hear what it was like, your post-graduation, but what it was like getting the minor, and then as well as how you're applying that currently.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Hayla. As Taylor mentioned, I got a minor in music. I got a Bachelor of Arts in Creative Writing and Asian Studies. And then within the Bachelor of Arts, I also got the minor in music. So I chose to pursue the music minor because I've always been interested in music, and I've been a pianist and a singer for many years of my life. So I knew I wanted to study music in some capacity while I was in school, but I also obviously could tell that it wasn't the only thing that I wanted to study, nor was it necessarily in my best interest for my long-term goals to pursue a Bachelor of Music as opposed to a Bachelor of Arts. So especially since if I did choose to pursue a Bachelor of Music, I would be needing to spend time in classes learning skills that I didn't necessarily see myself using after graduation. So there were a couple specific in-depth musical skills that I wanted to learn, and a minor gave me the freedom to select only those classes that would suit me the best, so I could really hone in on those skills that I was interested in. And just like Taylor mentioned earlier, the minor gave me the option of customizing my music education for me. So for me, those skills were music theory, making music electronically, using programs like Logic and Ableton, and choral singing. I didn't see myself becoming a performer or a composer or a full-time music teacher after college. So things like private lessons or more advanced composition courses, or even conducting or pedagogy classes, weren't necessary for my personal education. And I went to the University of Michigan, so I'm not sure if this is how it works at all schools, but in my case, I had access to courses offered by the music school within Michigan without needing to audition for and be accepted by the music school. So, you're getting access to a lot of resources and things that you might not necessarily otherwise have access to. So that was sort of my decision process and I've been graduated I graduated in 2020. So my day job is not music related, but outside of that, I'm currently the co-director of a high school extracurricular a cappella group I also teach piano to beginning and intermediate level students, and I occasionally sing as a section leader in church choirs. So obviously all things that really benefit from the things I learned while I was in school from my minor. I would say the biggest takeaway from my minor was, like I said, I was interested in music theory. So I'm still using music theory in every way that I use music today. Of course, those classes were substantially based in classical music or Baroque music theory, but the techniques can still, definitely be applied to contemporary music. And since being involved in pop a cappella, I arrange a lot of contemporary music. Those lessons have proven to be really useful when I approach arrangements. So that's been really important for me. I've also, like I mentioned, I've spent time in a university choir. So that's taught me a lot about vocal technique and strategies for group singing that I not only apply in the a cappella group that I direct, but I also use when I'm singing in church choirs. And, especially a situation where you might be jumping from church choir to church choir one week to the next, there's not really time to adjust to that new setting. So the skills that I got in those classes for my minor, I'm still applying, all the time. And then, like I said, since I don't work full time as a musician and I'm not really looking to work full time as a musician, I don't have to worry about the fact that I don't have a music degree, but it's also been extremely useful that I was able to focus on those skills that I chose in school because they are serving me well post graduation. So I think a minor is a really great option for anyone who loves music and is really interested in it, but maybe doesn't feel the need to put all of your eggs in one basket and you want to pursue other things in school as well. So yeah, just like Sean said as well, that was a pretty broad overview. So if you have questions during the Q&A, be happy to answer them.
Thank you. All right. Okay, so as we've discussed, there are a lot of different programs. There's a lot of ways to study music in college, whether it's a performance degree, a music theory degree, PAT, getting a music minor. There are so many ways. Generally, what you would like to study and how you would like to study it, it's time to actually look into choosing programs. And there are so many music programs, across the nation, across the world, which is wonderful, but that does mean it can be a little overwhelming when you are going to start applying. So there are a lot of things to consider, but these are kind of where I suggest you start. So first of all, what degree do you want? So not every school is going to offer every program at every level. So what I mean by that is there may be a school that only offers performance degrees at the graduate level. So even if you like that school as an undergraduate, you can't go. So that won't be the school for you. Not every school is going to have a production or performing arts technology program. Not every school has a musical theater BFA. As Sean said, some schools offer a Bachelor of Music in Musical Theater, and so schools might only offer that and not offer a BFA, or they may only offer a BFA and not offer a Bachelor of Music. So it's pretty important that you know kind of what you want to do, so that will affect what schools you apply to. Of course, it's always okay to apply to one school for one type of program and another school for a different type of program. Also, if you're interested in potentially getting a dual degree, so what that looks like, it's actually what I did in my undergrad. I got a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Music in different fields. It's easier to do at some schools than others. And some schools already have structures in place to do that, and some schools don't. And some schools, I don't know if schools ever ban it, but it may not be very realistic. So if that's something you're considering, you're going to want to ask about that when you're looking to schools, or look on their website and see. Or maybe you're just interested in getting a double major, which is where you get one degree. So you get like a Bachelor of Music, but you have two majors. You want to make sure that the school allows that or has the flexibility to allow that. And then if there are certain minor topics that you're interested in, you want to make sure that the school offers those as well. So that's a good way to start narrowing down programs. And then think of curriculum. Most schools, if you go on their websites and you go to the degree and you click on it, there's usually a whole list of what the coursework would look like. I really recommend doing that because I think sometimes we get a little surprised once we're in a program and we're like, I have to do what? I have to take this. And so you want to make sure that the majority of the classes you're going to take are things you're interested in, are things you would like to learn. Of course, there's always going to be classes that you just have to take that are requirements and you might not honestly be interested in, but you just want to make sure that the whole degree program is topics that you're interested in, and it's not like topics that you do not want to study. Another thing to look at, and these are kind of specific to, especially if you're interested in music, what kind of performance opportunities are there? And what kind of performance opportunities do they offer just for performance majors? Or if you don't want a performance degree, but you do want to perform, what are their non-major performance opportunities? So for example, that could look like in a voice performance context, some schools might distinguish between like classical voice and opera majors. And so if you're interested in still being in the opera, you want to check, like, if I do this degree, will I be allowed to audition for, the operas? Or look at the school and what kind of co-curricular or extracurricular opportunities are there. Whether there's like prominent student organizations that are putting on shows, or even school sponsored clubs that are putting on shows, just making sure you know what kind of opportunities you'll have to actually use your craft. Another consideration is faculty. So something that is semi-unique with music programs is if you have a principal instrument or you're a singer, you will probably be working one-on-one in terms of lessons. So you want to make sure that you're going to study with someone that hopefully you like. And then also, how many students does that teacher have? Or in general, what's the student to faculty ratio? You hear that talked about in any degree, not just music, like look at the faculty and who will be teaching you. But that's definitely a major consideration, especially if you're going to be a performance or you're going to have like a principal teacher. So even if, like, for example, you're studying production, if you go to a program where you have to have a principal instrument, which could also be voice, you might still end up in lessons, or lessons are required. And so you want to make sure that that teacher is someone you like studying with. So even when you're picking schools, that's something you can consider. And then another big thing is affordability. What are the tuition and costs? Do they offer scholarship opportunities? Sometimes schools might have like more scholarship opportunities for the graduate level than the undergrad, or vice versa. So you want to look at that, like which opportunities are open to you. Also, location, cost of living varies greatly. Consider, okay, the tuition may be lower here, but maybe the cost of living is very high. Also, what is your relationship to the location? Most music schools that are connected to a university are going to work on in-state, out-of-state tuition rates. So if you're from the state or from what they consider residency, which could often be like surrounding states, it depends on the school, that will be more affordable than if you're out of state. So that's another thing to always look at and narrow down. And when you're considering all of these things, the goal isn't to find necessarily, like, obviously you want to find programs that are going to work for what you want, but the goal isn't to find programs that are almost exactly the same. Like, it's okay for you to apply to different types of programs that you're interested in all of them. Or maybe this one has like better scholarship opportunity, but it's not quite what you want in terms of like teaching or performance opportunity. But this one is like not as affordable, but it has like the exact curriculum you want. It's okay to apply to multiple and just see what happens. So that last point about affordability brings up like financial aid, which is a huge consideration when applying to and going to school and even after school. Financial aid is definitely one of the like biggest things to consider. And my number one tip is to exhaust all your avenues. So what I mean by that is use every financial aid resource you can. I think that at least when I was younger, like I thought how it worked is like you either get a full ride to school from one source or you don't. But that's not how it works. Like there are different funding sources from different areas. So one avenue is federal aid. So the FAFSA comes out, I think it opens October 1st most years. So you can start filling it out then for the following like year. And that is the free application for federal student aid. And you need to fill that out to be considered for federal aid. And really everyone should fill it out. It's a really great place to start. That's how you're going to see like your loan options, as well as possibly any grants. And then looking at the program you're applying to. A lot of schools will offer scholarship, but you need to figure out on the application, is there a separate application or are you automatically considered when you're going through the application process? Also, it may depend on your degree, like auditioned programs, a lot of times those have automatic consideration, but non-audition programs don't, and there might be a separate application. And then another layer within that is if you're going to apply to a school of music or a conservatory that's within a bigger university, you might want to figure out, does the School of Music have an application for financial aid? And then does the university have an application for financial aid? And again, you want to submit as many of these as possible because you want to try to use all of the funding sources available. Also, there are awards and competitions that are exclusively for high schoolers. And so in your junior, senior year, you're eligible for those and you can save those to go towards your tuition. A great place to start is if your high school has a high school counselor. Typically, they're the ones who are going to be getting those like push out of information towards them. Of course, unfortunately, with music, it really varies in terms of if your high school is actually hearing about these, but it's definitely something to search. Don't just search like college scholarship opportunities for music students, search scholarship opportunities for high school students as well as competitions. If you really like performing, there may be competitions for high schoolers where you can win some money and you can put it aside for college. And then there's also independent scholarship and funding. So there are lots and lots of arts organizations who offer applications that you can apply to for scholarship. Typically, there is usually a written component about why you think it would be useful and why you're pursuing your degree. But the best way to find those is on the internet, just searching for music scholarships. And just the first thing you want to do is check the eligibility. So, who can actually apply for these and use them. And if you meet those conditions, definitely go ahead and apply. There's a lot of different funding sources. And again, the goal is to just put out as many applications as possible. And that way you can try to like get as much funding as possible. And then all of those things will have deadlines. So in general, I found that financial aid deadlines and scholarship deadlines sit earlier than program deadlines. So while most undergrad programs are going to have either November 1st or December 1st deadlines, you might see financial aid deadlines are going to be earlier. So that might be October, September, it might be the summer. Some might be even the spring before, especially those high school awards. You might have to apply to those the spring that you graduate high school, before that date. So or starting to get onto applications and starting to get that started, you might want to look at scholarship and financial aid first. So, we've talked about the programs, we've talked a little bit about financial aid, and now it's actually time to submit the applications. There are so many terms. Applications can be very, there's a lot to do. So I'm just going to break down some of the terms so it's a little less confusing. So these are just common things that are asked for on applications. A resume. I know when I was a high schooler, I saw the word resume and I was like, I don't know what that means because I've had one job. I was a host at a restaurant. And so I thought a resume was just you list your one job. And so I was like, I don't really know how that's relevant to my application. But a resume, especially when you're applying to undergraduate programs, they want you to detail all of the experiences you've had with music or, with whatever you're applying to, as well as your jobs. So that's what a resume is. And then a personal statement will explain why you want to pursue the degree and your goals. And then a recommendation or a reference. So a recommendation is typically a letter from a teacher or a mentor or a trustworthy adult that you've worked with. A recommendation is usually a letter from them that tells the program, hey, this student is awesome. And then a reference is typically you just list somebody's contact information that if the school wanted to reach out to them, they would say lovely, amazing things about you. Transcripts have your grades from previous educational institutions, so typically high school. And then test scores. Test score requirements vary. Some schools may require an ACT or an SAT score. I know because of the pandemic, test scores are being required less and less. And also if you're applying to maybe a conservatory that's not part of a bigger university, they may not even require test scores. It really depends. So you just always want to check that component. And in most cases, the standardized test you take in high school, whichever your school opts to do, should qualify. But there are cases where they may require an SAT math score and your school didn't administer or proctor that. So you might have to go and get it separately, sign up online and take that test. And then fees are payments needed to submit application. I do want to note here, a lot of schools, part of their financial aid packages are fee waivers. So when you're applying, definitely and see, hey, is there any way I can get a fee waiver? They usually have an application. And if you're using something like the Common App, for example, if you're applying to a university and then you're applying to a music program within, there are ways to get fees waived talking to the Common App or whatever application technology you're using. But I would personally just start with reaching out to the admissions of whatever program you're applying to and see if they offer any sort of fee waivers. So there's also early action. That's something that's really popular with undergrad programs. There might be a deadline that's before the regular deadline where you will hear results sooner. And then along with that is deferment. Sometimes even if you do submit by that early action, they will defer your decision, which means they haven't made a decision yet and they're going to let you know on the regular timeline. There's also pre-screenings. So both Hala and Sean mentioned auditions. So pre-screenings are typically reserved for performance and musical theater programs where you submit videos of you singing or, playing your instrument. I'm not sure, musical theater might have a singing and dancing requirement. Yep. Okay. Awesome. And you submit videos and then from there, the school will decide whether to grant you an audition. So going into auditions, that is a live presentation of your talents for the admissions panel. Now, not every music degree has an audition. And that's another thing to consider. If you know you don't want to be in an as performance heavy program, but you still want to study music, you might want to look at non-audition programs. And a lot of Bachelor of Arts programs, for example, don't have auditions. And then even within the majors. So if you want to study production, but you don't want a performance heavy component, you can kind of tell based on curriculum and degree type which schools are right for you. So schools, a lot of times that have performing arts technology or production degrees that are Bachelor of Music are going to have a heavy performance component and are going to also be auditioned. But schools that are offering a Bachelor of Arts in the same field, production and performing arts technology, might not be auditioned. And that's because their curriculum does not include as much performance in whatever your principal instrument is. And its focus, or like, you know, the production is the majority of your curriculum. And then some of those programs also offer Bachelors of Science, which means the engineering component of recording is going to be emphasized. Have different test score requirements. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're choosing degree type and you're kind of predicting what the application will look like. There's also interviews. Interviews are pretty straightforward. They're a conversation rather than an audition. And so if you're applying to something like composition, you might submit a portfolio of compositions and then do an interview as opposed to like an audition. And there's also sample and trial lessons. This is another thing that's kind of music school specific, where because you will be potentially working one-on-one, if you have a principal teacher, it's totally okay to reach out to faculty members and ask for sample or trial lessons. A lot of times it's actually incorporated into the application, or if you get onto like the admissions emailing list, they might email you and they're like, we have a campus day and we recommend you set up trial lessons for this day. So that's always a good thing to check in with the admissions office about. Ask them like kind of what the policies on sample and trial lessons are, because schools do widely vary, but that's definitely something to consider. And you can get a lot of good information about the school and the program directly from a faculty member. So this is just a possible timeline of what, you know, applying to schools will look like. So summer, you start looking. September, October, you start getting some stuff together, recording your pre-screening, sample lessons, scholarship, FAFSA. November and December, submitting your application, hearing back from pre-screening results. If it's an audition program, typically those fall in January, February, and then March and April, you're going to hear decisions back from schools. And typically by May 1st, you make a decision. So it's definitely a long process. Once it's done, it feels amazing. All right, so I'm going to stop the screen share. And we are going to do a Q&A. Oh, it looks like Candice is popping on. So yeah. We'll start with some questions. I'll look at the chat here. Okay, so the question in the chat is, how would I contact a teacher for a trial lesson? What if I can't go to visit the school? So I don't know if anyone wants to do that.
I can answer that partially. I am a very odd case when it comes to musical theater school, because most people when they're applying and like when they choose a program or a degree pathway that's so specific, they are like sure about what they're gonna do like at the beginning of high school. I made the decision to apply for musical theater programs like right when the audition season like begun, like things were becoming to be due. And I was actually on a vocal performance track, undergrad voice performance track up until that point. And so for me, in voice performance, having a really strong connection with a teacher is very, very important. And I knew that like I'm a very picky person, like to begin with. So like when it came to like someone who's going to take care of my voice, like I was very, very like particular. And so really the easiest way now in this age of Zoom, it's just email and it's like, hey, can we do like a Zoom like lesson? And usually you can find the email of a teacher like on the school's website, and you just like reach out and send them an email and be like, hey, and like these teachers are always busy, so you can like if they don't answer back the first time, you just kind of just keep pestering them. Another good reason to do competitions and things and like master classes and things like that is because like it builds up your network, and like you might do a competition and like some of the judges might be a teacher at a school that you're, or they might have ties to a school that you're looking at, and like if you start talking to them, they might put you in contact with teachers. So for me, like I would just do Zooms because of COVID. Like that was when I was primarily auditioning for programs. Like I couldn't go to the school, and like it would just be like you're kind of like reaching out and like hoping that they offer Zoom, and like hoping last year they're like, because things had to keep going on, and Zoom was really that medium that they would have something. So yeah, I would just say email, because like that's what this process kind of teaches you. You kind of just have to throw yourself out there, like in all aspects of it, like in email, in performance, in auditions, whatever. And like you just wait and see what happens.
Yeah, thank you. Yep, email is definitely a very powerful tool. I know I'm personally like a nervous emailer, but yeah, it's one of those skills that once you get going, it's very helpful. Candice, thank you so much for joining us. I would love for you to introduce yourself. I think you're muted.
Yes.
Oh,
Sorry, I'm like myself off mute. Hi, my name is Candice Odister. I work in the College Conservatory of Music in the but I also work with undergraduate students as well. Feel free to ask any questions that you have.
all right. Let me check the chat. So another question is, what if I want to major in 2 things in music? Can I do that? I well, if Candice, do you want to answer this one?
Sure. This is for undergraduate students. You can major in 2 majors. I would suggest reaching out to the faculty first, just to kind of get a feel of what the class or course requirements are, so that you're aware of having to take sometimes maybe 18 credit hours to graduate within the 5-year period to earn 2 undergraduate degrees. That also kind of allows you to get a feel of both programs that you're interested in, because sometimes students don't understand that, you know, one program really requires a lot of time, whereas the other program may not. So I think it's really important to reach out to the faculty first to get a feel of what the class requirements and what the major requires.
Yeah, I definitely agree. When I was applying to schools, I was really interested in either doing 2 music majors or dual degreeing. And I had a lot of very real conversations with faculty about, you know, what the course load would look like, how it would benefit me, as well as with my admissions counselors and with the advising team at the school of like realistically how that would look. And like Candice said, there is like certain year requirements in terms of when you have to finish. So at my program at U of M, I had 7 years to do the 2 degrees I did, which seems like a lot of time, but was scary at times. What else? So Candice answers this in the chat, but I will read it out loud just so you can hear. What do I wear for an audition? Is it the same as pre-screening? And Candice said, I typically suggest students wear what they would wear to a performance because first impression is important. And that is true.
Could I add to that?
Yeah.
I would say like make sure like you look for like specifications for your major, because like sometimes like attire for performance like varies from major to major. Because I know like if I were going into or like, you know, really formal, and like they get really specific. They'll be like, you know, if you're wearing like a dress, like no exposed shoulders, you know, you may have to shawl that up. You might have to like make sure it's a cap sleeve, like, and it can be very specific. And for musical theater, depending on like a dance audition versus like a acting or singing audition, like you might have something different, because I know for dance you want to be in music and music, not in music, in dance like attire. So like you might want to be in, you know, leggings. If you need to wear a dance belt, you're in a dance belt. If you, it's like a ballet portion, ballet shoes or jazz shoes, and making sure you have those specific things too. And like if you're doing an acting audition, they might have you do a lot like a movement based like portion of that. So you might want to be in something that's loose, but something that like isn't necessarily like basketball shorts and a tank top. So you just kind of like play it by ear and like for those specific things. And like, but I think that that's a good like framework to go into like what would you wear for a performance in that specific field. Because like if I'm doing a musical theater performance, I might dress that's a little more dressed up version of myself, but it's not necessarily like suit and tie, you know? So like just keep that in mind too.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. And also kind of find that balance of, you definitely want to look nice, and in your pre-screenings as well. That was part of the question. Definitely anytime you're on video, you know, look your best, but also dress like yourself is really important. You don't want to wear something that you feel weird in, because it can throw you off. Which is, it's always a hard balance to find, but you know, meeting the requirements, but then also dressing as yourself. Let me check the chat for more questions. So what is the benefit of earning a degree in music performance? Can't I just go to big cities and attend auditions? That is an awesome question. I can start with just like my piece. You're gonna get a lot of skills. That's, I mean, the main benefit. The curriculum is designed to make you a better artist. And I think that sometimes we don't realize what we need until we're in a program. And the program helps us figure out, you know, what are our strengths and what are our weaknesses. And then in addition, the program helps us fill those weaknesses, as opposed to just starting to audition. You're going to learn what your strengths and weaknesses are, but there's not going to be support to then like bring your weaknesses up to the level you want them at. I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that.
I mean, yeah, like this isn't as specific as like specifically like instrument performance or voice performance, but I know like for me, it's really those skills. Because for us here, we do a diagnostic at the beginning of the year, and they just like, you go in, you do a monologue, you sing a song, and they're just like, they take you and they're like, here's where we see you, here's where we want to go. And it's like, how do we elevate? Because you get to this point and you're like, you, for a lot of us, like when you get into like conservatory style programs, you kind of were like probably the big fish in your high school, or like you were, you know, really performing at like a high level in your high school. But now you're in college and you're getting ready to go into the real world. And like a lot of schools will have resources for like summer programs too, because like those don't stop like during high school. Like you whether you're auditioning to be in shows or in performances, or you're doing internships or you're doing things like that, your school might have resources that you get through the school. So, and the question is, why can't I just go to the big cities and audition? I mean, you can, but it gives you that connection. And like, you might have a teacher who's connected to a certain, in my case, like for a certain regional theater, and they might be able to connect you with people there and like help you in your audition process, or like get you an audition. Because sometimes it's like word of mouth, and it's like that networking you need too, because it's like they might be like, why should I? Because sometimes like at these regional houses, you have like working professionals, because like this is something like a pre-professional going into professional at the undergraduate level at least. And so you might need that person at the university to get you in the door, because you might have the talent, like, but you may need that person, that extra boost. So yeah, it's like really for me, like my big things be resources and our like skills as an artist, and like not just being able to do what you set out to do, but like how to work in the industry that you want to go into. Because like we forget that like your talent and your skill is just that, but you're going into an industry that has a lot of different like, you know, gears and facets that are very specific, and like having people who have done it before and who are experienced really helps.
Awesome, thank you. I actually have a question for Candice. Thinking back to when I was applying to my undergraduate, and even a little bit now as I'm thinking of graduate studies. In terms of recommendations and references, what sort of people should we be asking to write a letter of recommendation on our behalf?
Typically, you wanted someone that knows your strengths, but also weaknesses. Someone that actually really knows you. Point blank. Period. Yeah. We normally suggest students reach out to their teacher, their voice teacher, someone that knows specifically what they're trying to do with their career. And that's the best person to kind of ask for a reference. If you're going into something like musicology or music theory, you're interested in studying a non-performance degree, I kind of suggest students reach out to both their academic teacher, but also their music teacher. It's nice to have kind of both sides. Someone that just that really knows your strength. You really want someone to just motivate you, that speaks highly of you. And a lot of times faculty will use that as, if there's a student that they're kind of on the fence of, and they're reaching their studio limit, they will read the recommendation letters to see how their teacher speaks well of them.
Also, that's good to know. I've always wondered kind of how recommendation letters are used in like the admissions process. So that's awesome. I did just want to read this out loud from the chat. Sorry, let me just find it. What does an audition look like on the day of? And Candice said, for most students, audition days are typically your specific audition followed by a meeting with the faculty. Yeah, so I don't know if, did you want to add to that, Candice?
Yeah, it kind of depends on your major too, because some areas will require a audition and then immediately following the audition, it's an interview. They want to just get to know you more. I know with musical theater students, they have this in the pre-screening process, they have a wild card video requirement, which is kind of just to show your non-musical or non-dance skill, something that's extra that kind of puts you over the top. And a lot of times, even within music performance degrees, the faculty kind of just want to know who you really are, like what other skills you have beyond music and dance and theater that you have that kind of puts you ahead of everyone else, which is really nice. There's also areas that don't participate in that, and they do a like just a general Q&A meeting with all of the students that are applying. That's also kind of helpful because you get a feel of the faculty and what's required with the program. I think that's mostly, some areas do like a lunch before auditions or interviews. There's some that have like a 2-day process where it's like a kind of meet and greet the night before, and then Saturday is the interview and auditions. So it just really kind of depends on your program, but typically it's a your specific audition time and either an interview afterwards or a meeting that's followed by your audition.
Thank you. So I don't want to keep everyone too long. So Sean, Hala, and Candice, do you have any like final thoughts, any like last piece of advice for the application process? Just anything to close us out.
Yeah, I just want to say, I know it's very daunting getting all of this information and having a million options thrown at you, but just take it one step at a time. And it's okay once you get into a program or are at the point where you're making a decision to change your mind. That's like, that happened to me several times throughout school. It happens to more people than you think. So just trust your gut and see what comes your way.
Yeah, I would say to echo that, like trusting in yourself and like really putting yourself out there and being yourself authentically. Because one thing I learned is that these programs, they know what they want. And if you show them a version of yourself that isn't really who you are, and they like that, and they're like, okay, I like what this person's presenting to me, you might get accepted and it might be your dream program like on paper, but because you like put this fabricated version of yourself out there and that's what they accepted, when you get there and you kind of like have to be yourself, you might end up being miserable because you didn't show who you are. And so trust that you're enough, trust that like in all that you are, whether you're the best person in music theory or the worst, trust that like if you're just honest about everything that you bring to the table, that the right program will find you and they will love who you are and love what you bring to the table. And just trust in that and be able to roll with the punches. And like one final thing that is like very, very important. Make sure you read like when they expect to like give you your results, because you kind of have to like use that to gauge like when you might find out so you don't stress yourself out. Because when you're doing this, you're already a high school senior and you have so many other things that you're worrying about just like as a student, like whether that's like taking the SAT and doing all these things and just graduating high school. You don't want and it probably will. Like I know, like there were many sleepless nights of me just like rocking and rolling, because like once you put yourself out there, you're basically at the mercy of these people. So just like I would just say trust that you're enough and try not to stress as best as possible and enjoy the ride, because it's a roller coaster.
I agree. Yeah, trusting yourself. I always suggest reaching out to the faculty and just getting a feel, because sometimes you have in your mind, like, this is the school I want to go to. But once you meet the faculty and kind of get a feel of just the city, your surroundings, it's all of it. You need to have kind of like a holistic experience when you're being educated. You want to make sure that it's the right fit for you. And so to me, I always feel like it's best to like kind of get a jump start on that and speak with faculty, speak to students that are currently in the program. That's highly important too. And speak to all faculty in the specific area that you're going into. Because sometimes students will reach out to one that, they're kind of like, oh, I really like that person's career and the direction that they've taken with their career. But it's really important to kind of just get a feel of everyone at the school and just make sure that it's the right fit for you.
Thank you all so much. That's great advice. I'm wishing I had this 5 years ago, but it's fine. We got through. Thank you so much, Candice, for joining us, and thank you, Hala and Sean, as well. If you have any questions, you can find my contact info as well as the rest of the Hear Us Hear Them staff info on our website, hearushearthem.org, and we are happy to help. If you're applying to CCM, Candice is available and her information's on the website as well. So yeah, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.